welcome to a new Paradigm of Education podcast. I'm your host, Monique along with Jen Zash. Today we have our very special guest with us. Her name is Christine Keller. Before I introduce our Christine, I'd love to introduce our podcast to you. So a new paradigm of education is an evolution in education that's been happening throughout the world. You know, the world as we know it has changed since the pandemic. We've seen all different types of schools being created, schools being decreated. People are kind of turning to their inner purpose in the world, and that's also being seen throughout our children. So what I really love about what Christine is creating is that she's got this Sangha Education Center, which is located in the historic Malcolm House on the Jericho Preserve, which offers heart-centered learning programs, which I really love, inspired by nature for young people with a range of abilities and needs, families and schools. It's a community, it's not a school. So Christine also teaches at an adjunct college as a professor. I hope I've got you correct. Yes. Yeah. And I'll let you introduce all of that other information about yourself, but she's interested in creating a balance between education, well-being, meeting each individual where they are at, and resisting the one-size-fits-all mindset that has not been doing any of us justice, which is hence why the new paradigm of education is here. And we invite guests like yourself, Christine, to come along and inspire us all with your wisdom. So I'd love to hear from you if you just wanted to elaborate a little bit more about your journey as an educator, or and how you got to your program, perhaps could be a start. That would be amazing.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here and to meet you, Monique, and to see you, Jennifer. My journey began probably, I wrote an article once saying my journey really began in childhood, because I truly appreciate the education and the educators who I was privileged to have an experience. I was born in 1964, so I started kindergarten in 1969, and it was a nice period of change in education. Things were very progressive. The education was really very interactive. I was involved in a lot of activities within school and after school, and it was just I felt a beautiful time, a time that I cherish and have learned from. And then fast forward to my life with my own children. I have two children now, ages 23 and 19, and it's a very different experience. What they had basically experienced in their educational career. Even though elementary school is always fun for everyone, generally speaking, we saw a definite shift in terms of what educators were going through themselves and basically the results on the students. So I can get into that, and if you'd like me to provide a little more detail. When my son was in first grade, I'll never forget, that is when basically, high stakes testing started to manifest. But it was also a time where educators were learning a little bit more about multisensory learning programs and like Orton Gillingham, Wilson Reading. And so for my son, who happens to have ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, and dysgraphia, that was important. So it was a good time and also a challenging time. So he basically benefited from some of the newer strategies and research-based methods that were being employed. But at the same time, we were moving into a high stakes, high achievement culture with a one-size-fits-all mentality. So that's where Sangha kind of began, was to really counter what we were experiencing within the schools and within society.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about what you've created
Yes.
at the Sangha? Because I do, knowing a little bit about it, I really do think it fills in a lot of the gaps that are missing in more of that traditional model. So that would be wonderful to share with our audience.
Yes, absolutely. So Sangha began in 2005, and again, as a direct result of my experience with my own children. Initially, we basically established multisensory hands-on enrichment programs for elementary school children. So they could basically not only have an enriched educational experience, but also a place where young people like my son could flourish without having to worry about the behaviors. Because many children with ADHD and other diagnoses basically might have difficulty sitting still. They might, various behaviors in the school setting, or maybe task avoidance because of a writing disability that aren't necessarily understood well. So when children would come to Sangha in the early days when we did enrichment programs. No one experienced difficulty because they were all accepted for who they are and how they learn. And so to this day, behavioral challenges are not an issue at Sangha. So basically, I moved Sangha forward based on the age and development of my own children. So at this point, we've been lucky to secure historic Malcolm House on the Jericho Preserve, where we're able to offer a range of different, as you mentioned, heart-centered learning programs. Some of them actually began in the elementary ages, where we had programs for nature and the environment, related to nature and the environment, cosmology and the universe, world cultures, things that our kids were really truly interested in. They understood that we're all one human family and wanted to be connected to one another in that way and learn on a deeper level. And that's definitely not something we see happening, not that it necessarily should, but we don't really see that type of depth of education, in our systems. So today we offer a range of different programs at Historic Malcolm House, and we've become a 501c3 nonprofit. We share our location with 2 other nonprofits who are also working on behalf of our young people. So again, each having their own, in a sense, paradigm shift in terms of what they know their kids need, their populations. So Karen Seiler, for example, works on behalf of young people who have autism and are nonverbal. Paula who runs Emotions Matter, works on behalf of young people with borderline personality disorder. And Sangha is really there for all families and for all kids and for schools. So basically, I usually say we work on behalf of young people with a range of abilities and needs because we all have a range of abilities and needs. So I really try to bring it to the human level, that we're all one human family and we really need to be there to work with one another. And our mission is basically, that there's diversity in nature and therefore in human nature, which is revealed through individual abilities, ideas, interests, needs, and cultural identities.
Yeah, can you give, I know because your organization came to my daughter's school, so I know a little bit about what it looks like, but for those who may not know, in practice, when you say heart-centered practices and heart-centered learning, maybe you can give our listeners some concrete examples of things that maybe as parents, as teachers, things that they can do, both in terms of heart-centered learning and then just to, we know what multisensory learning is, right? But a lot of people may not know. So if you can kind of touch upon those two a little bit further to expand, that would be awesome.
Yes, absolutely. So as we said earlier, education and well-being to us really need to go hand in hand. So heart-centered approach is really about bridging that gap between education and well-being and love being at the center, love for all humans and all beings. So our programs range from, I mentioned previously, nature and the environment is definitely a big part of it. We're lucky to be on the Jericho Preserve, so we have access to, the preserve and also to an area that we will be farming. But as you mentioned, Jen, one of our first programs was a Start Your Own School Garden program, where we would basically work with a school, do a consultation to kind of find out what their interest level is in starting their own school garden and guiding them through the process, designing the garden, guiding them through what they actually can accomplish in terms of education in the garden, and providing some initial workshops. So the workshops we typically offer are a seed start session where we get them going with the actual seeds or transplants. We actually make the beds for them and deliver the beds and deliver the soil. And then we also offer something called nature communities, which has more of the philosophical background. I tend to lean towards that since at SUNY Old Westbury, I teach within the history and philosophy department. So the why of the situation is important, the why and the how. Why do we do this? And then how do we move it forward? So the students get a nice background in terms of how we are all connected, as one, as part of the Earth family. And then we move into compost and worms, which the students love. Your son in particular, yes, it was very nice. They really just, they all gush that they have to oh, the worm, and they get all antsy about it, but they in the end embrace it, and they're very excited to learn about how important worms are to creating life and enabling life on Earth. And then they actually get to take the worms and go out into the garden and let them free into the soil, into their new beds. So we do a variety of different types of programs in terms of start your own school garden. For your son's school, it actually turned into an assembly because they wanted to have the whole fourth grade involved. So we had over 100 students learning about their place in nature, as well as why they're creating, a school garden. And luckily, again, Plainview has a beautiful group of principals, teachers who really embrace this. So we've been working with them for the past several years to expand the garden. And then now at Malcolm House, we're going to be able to invite them to us as we cultivate our own new farm. We will have field trips for the nature and wellness programs, which are basically plant and learn sessions, as well as forest bathing, which not everyone is familiar with. When they hear the term, they tend to think bathing is in bath. Is there water on the premises? But it's not a physical bath. It's a bath in nature. It's basically a way to reconnect to nature. And we've been offering forest bathing at Malcolm House for the past year and a half for the community. So we've had people of all ages, and including, like I said, older adults who've come to us for the experience. And now we'll be opening it up to schools as well, which kind of goes back to the education and wellness piece, because they're learning about their connection to nature, they're experiencing their connection to nature, and they're also healing. There's also the wellness piece. They're able to minimize anxiety and cultivate joy by being connected and a part of nature.
Yeah, when I first heard about your programs, really, to me, it really touched upon all that was missing in terms, not all, but a lot, as far as getting out into nature, and how powerful that is and how simple. I know for my kids, like making their own garden at school was the highlight of elementary school. And now it's more important than ever as they're behind these computers learning virtually, right?
Yes.
And the ideas of belonging and purpose, you really encompass both of those. You create a space for everyone, like you said, all types of learners, all types of people, personalities. Labels are removed, right? It's all about community and love. It's really beautiful. And then the other piece too is how, which we didn't even talk about yet, and I don't want to monopolize because of course I'm sure Monique has questions as well. But Monique and I, with our book and what we also envision for a new paradigm, it's a global collaboration and working with our communities. And you do that, I believe, right?
Well, we do have the COVID pandemic actually opened things up in a certain way, where we're now connecting with more people in other states who participate with us virtually. So we do offer virtual programs, but again, the hands-on in-person programs are most valuable.
So
but it's
you're
still
doing like career, like shadowing and interns and things like that?
Sure. Yeah, so basically, we have a range of programs. Two of the most I guess connected would be Project Stewardship and Civic Mentoring. So Project Stewardship is a way for young people to come together for education and socialization. So again, that piece that you said is often missing too is the socialization piece. Even though in school, children are with children, young people are with young people, it's still not that same dynamic where they actually can really spend as much time together interacting about educational issues, in the classroom. So what we're doing is we twice a month, we take young people on an outing to a particular community partner site. And we also have people coming in, community partners, to do workshops. So we work with other nonprofits and other organizations within the Long Island community, and and it's really a child-centered approach. Our young people provide us with input on areas they'd like to learn more about, and then we arrange the workshops and outings based on their input and interests. So they're really able to take their learning to the next level, and everything involves a hands-on project or hands-on learning in some way, shape, or form. One example would be the Waterfront Center in Oyster Bay. We've gone to that. They've come to us recently during our summer program, Summer at the Sangha, which is a 4-week program that runs second week in July until first week of August. And they brought a touch tank to teach young people about marine life. So that was the first step of them coming to us. And then we reciprocate by going to them for a program. And we went to their beachfront area, and we were able to actually then use the nets to catch the sea life to continue the learning. And this season we'll actually be going out on their historic boat, the Christine, to do some scientific analysis of some of the sea life, like looking at plankton under a microscope. So there is definitely an educational component, but that's for only part of the session. And the other half is our young people coming together to discuss anything they like. It could be about what they've learned, but they're going to learn more about one another in the process.
That's right. That's right. That's beautiful. So you're meeting them where they're at in terms of socializing, creating natural, organic opportunities, hearing what they're interested in, and then curating your offerings based on what the kids want, if I'm hearing you correctly. Right?
Yes. And then there are times where I also know what they need. So it's a combination of offering what they want and then also providing what they need. And working with, again, lovely community partners. One thing our young people don't always have the opportunity to do these days is carpentry and woodworking. So we've done quite a number of projects in our project stewardship program, as well as in our mentoring program, thanks to Malcolm Hall, who is a community partner of ours, who's a carpenter. So he has been coming to us regularly, and we're working on a project to build a totem pole for our meadow farm. So it's a process, and it builds a variety of different skills besides being, enjoyable and new for our young people, because it really does take patience and it takes planning. So those executive function skills that are often missing or lagging in many of our young people, we basically build naturally through the experiences that we offer. So planning, time management, organization, and so forth.
Wow, it's so amazing. Keep going. Yeah, keep going.
No, that's okay.
No, I was just going to say it's really amazing. It really feels like holistic education, because you've written that down on the website, and now I'm hearing you, and it really is like all different aspects of education, really, really considered, and I love that it's so interactive and applicable, and it's also helping children with their anxiety. It's helping them with the real world. Learning is just happening, as it is. And then you've got all this aspect of the partnerships as well, which is amazing, because I was going to say that to you, that it sounds like a massive project, and you must need a lot of hands there, like volunteers as well as partnerships, because there's so many aspects to this project. It sounds quite big, and I guess I'm curious to know, like, how did it start? Like, did it start as like one simple project and then you expanded it out? And then how did your vision grow? Like, was it done like through partnerships with people, or did you have these sort of visions of what was needed, or did you read what the children were needing? Or I don't know, I have all these visionary ideas, because I just like to imagine other types of schools or other types of communities that people maybe want to create. So I just wondered about those steps, if that makes sense.
Yes. Well, it really starts with the individual, the young person, because we base everything on their strengths and interests as well as their needs. So it really manifests out of them. And the perfect example is our mentoring program. It's called Civic mentoring, because we are also involved with community partners and also working on projects that can help others. So it is all about reciprocal relationships. That's really the essence of what we do. It's not just about one person, but it's about community and that reciprocity. So our mentoring program is geared towards really anyone who wants to build particular skills. We base it on something called the ALSUP, Assessment of Lagging Skills and Unsolved Problem Sheet, that is part of the collaborative and proactive solutions approach developed by Dr. Ross Green. So initially, parents typically fill out or complete the ALSUP, although it's not really supposed to be used as a checklist. It's a way for us to get a snapshot of what lagging skills a young person may have. And again, beyond diagnosis, we're not worried about if they have one at all, but what areas they may be having difficulty with. And then we also find out about their strengths and interests. And then we basically create community projects for them to be involved with, where they'll be able to naturally build those skills. So it's not, and there might be times where more direct learning occurs, but it really is very natural and project-based. So strength-based learning, project-based learning, and community partnerships are really key to what we do. And through our mentoring program, we put together a skills development plan. So it basically has the top three goals, the top three lagging skills that we turn into goals. And we talk about how we're going to accomplish building those skills. That's very different also than in the schools, where a skill deficit might be identified, but there's really no discussion about now how are we going to go about remediating that skill or helping that young person to build that skill. It's more just documented versus executed in terms of helping them along. So here we're talking about how, and then we also then relate it to the specific projects. And our young person works one-on-one with a particular mentor. So they work with someone who is a good match for them. So for example, if these skill building opportunities also often relate to college and career. So even though that's not the only reason for, helping someone to build a skill, because we're building skills to become a more authentic human being, but we definitely can connect it to college and career. So someone might be interested in media or art, it could be a variety of different areas. And then we provide them with a mentor who has some skill in that area. And then together they work on these projects. And at times we'll even pair teams up. So there'll be a mentor-mentee team one and a mentor-mentee team two. And because they have similar overlapping interests and maybe even projects, they'll work together. So multiple layers.
Can you share what one project has looked like, just so we can kind of get a visual, a little bit of a story?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've worked in relation to COVID, we've done more in-house projects, where prior to COVID, we were actually out to more community partner sites for projects to help the community. Now we're doing a combination of both. So one example, which kind of connects the two, would be a young man named Jackson. We were able to get him involved with North Shore Land Alliance. He had an interest in plant life. He has a scientific mindset. He has many talents actually, but that's one of them happens to be in the sciences. So one thing he was interested in doing was identifying plant life. So we had him work with these different apps on his phone to be able to go out into nature to identify plants, capture the information, and then put together a report based on it. Because of climate change, North Shore Land Alliance wanted to kind of find out the state of plants, when they were actually developing and how they were developing, because they saw a shift. So he was able to document plant life in relation to climate change. Then another project he did with plant life was at Sweetbriar Nature Center. And there they knew that some of their gardens weren't doing well. So he used those same tools to actually identify what was in which particular garden at what time. So similarly, but for different purposes. Then we took his knowledge of plant life that he developed, and then at Sangha, we incorporated that into identifying plants on the Jericho Preserve, but more so for a technology project that Jackson and another young man named Matthew were going to work on together. So they were both interested in computer science. So now we implemented, I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of the Raspberry Pi. It's a little handheld kind of computer. You build the hardware and you program the coding language to be able to do certain functions. So what they did was they created a variety of, they learned a few languages, Python and C++, and then they took that to develop a watering system for the plants. So that was something they thought they would love to do, because again, they're really about helping nature. They care very much about the environment. So they thought a watering system would be, a great project for themselves.
Awesome example. I just love how that illustrates meaningful learning. right? You have a child who's interested in plants. You're integrating something kids already like, unfortunately, maybe their phones and an app, but we have to meet them where they're at, right?
Yes.
And then, I mean, I find as a school psychologist for so long that what we teach very often for them to generalize it to other settings, to apply it to meaningful types of tasks is really where is definitely an issue, I think, in education. And that was such a great example of how when you meet a child where they're at with their interest, how it can expand and how it can address, you know, the socialization, expand it out to, you know, computer programming, to different settings. That's amazing. That's really, really neat. And it sounds like that example is something that even parents can do, or really any teacher, I would imagine. Is that true, you think?
Yes. Anything we do can translate into any environment, and because you can keep projects big, you can keep them small or make them bigger. The size is really up to you. And again, the opportunities, there are always community partners who want to come into schools to work with our young people. So as the COVID pandemic, you know, shifts, hopefully, you know, more of that can occur as well. You know, we've been doing that through our Start Your Own School Garden program and other workshops over the years. So yeah, and even parents, like you said, can work with their school's teacher and go into the classroom. My daughter was lucky enough to have a wonderful teacher, Mr. Mers, when she was in 5th grade. And we were completely on the same page in terms of education. And at open house, he mentioned to all of the parents, you're welcome to come into this classroom anytime you like. You know, I'll have parents here every day. That's not an issue, and it won't interfere with the curriculum. You know, he was still able to get things accomplished, you know, and people did participate. We actually created a school garden with him at that elementary school. And myself and a friend, Susan, who is a farmer, went into the classroom to teach them about certain topics. So, and we weren't the only ones. He had parents there continually throughout the school year. So it can be done.
That's great. So kids are also
the other half about
to different careers, right? I was saying that kids are also now being exposed to different types of potential careers down the road that they may not have otherwise known about. You know, we all know about like the teacher, the police officer, but there's infinite careers out there and paths. And so I love that as well.
And this last part of that project I should mention, after the coding was done through the Raspberry Pi system, another part of that project was our young people helped, those two in particular, plus another student helped to develop our medicine wheel garden. So in the center of our brand new farm space, we're going to have a medicine wheel garden, which is a Native American idea. So we had certain students were painting the rocks that we're going to have that represent the 4 directions. Some students were making kiosks that had educational signs about what the meaning behind the 4 directions is. Matthew and Jackson, they helped to initially design the garden, and that included information about plant life that goes in each section, some of which Jackson learned from the experiences that he had at those other locations. So you actually are applying and synthesizing and then creating. So if you think about Bloom's taxonomy, which I'm not sure how many viewers are familiar with, but it's a pyramid for understanding levels of learning and development that are really important. Rather than students just learning facts and regurgitating them back to their teachers on a test, you actually want to get beyond that. And you want to be able to take what you learn and then understand it, comprehend it, and then use it, apply it, right? Synthesize it, and then create something with it. So we're really actually embodying Bloom's taxonomy in the work that we do as well. And now this year, that medicine wheel garden is actually going to be built by them. So they will do the hands-on labor involved in creating what they designed.
That's really powerful. I love this idea of connecting with the land. And I also wondered if there's a space to also connect with the original people of the land as well and bring that in as part of the community. That would be really powerful as well, because it's giving meaning and it's giving kind of ancient wisdom to children rather than them kind of reading about it through a book. Not that I'm saying that that's what they do, but it's that, you know, kind of wisdom sharing, storytelling, you know, this is the land, this is what we did with it, this is how you care for it, sacred sort of Do you have anything
Yes.
like that, or do they connect in that way, or is that going to be something that could happen? I just had that idea.
Yes. No, wonderful. Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah. So 2 parts or 3 parts to that. Well, Malcolm Hall, who is our carpenter, he is from Guyana. So he brings with him not local native traditions, but in general, some of the native culture that he was a part of. And so people who come to us may have a background that it enables us to further the education through firsthand experience that the individual teacher or mentor or community partner may have. We're also related to or involved with other organizations such as Women's Diversity Network on Long Island, which was established in early 2017 to bring women together towards common purpose. And it is women from diverse backgrounds. So you have women from a variety of different cultures, including Native American. And we do have some connections to some women on Long Island who have Native American backgrounds. And we are actually going to be, I've reached out to a couple of people in the past from Shinnecock, but it's, difficult to find. Long Island was, like everywhere, had many different tribes living here. So it's difficult to find people who are from your direct area, but you can find, Native people who, of course, grew up and lived, on Long Island. So yeah, that's definitely a part of what we plan to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that kind of brings me to another question that I ask everybody that comes on the podcast. You've already shared so much vision and so much that you've done. It's like unbelievable what you've been creating. But my next question is, if in this new paradigm of education, if you could have any vision for a new paradigm beyond whatever's already there, it can be something in the future, something that's happening already, what would that be?
For education in general, part of, I guess that's really 2-part. One other reason for the impetus for starting Sangha was also to bring educators to us. So basically having the schools, not only us go into the schools where teachers and others might feel limited in terms of what their abilities are to enact change, but when they come to us, empowering them through some similar programs, enabling them to minimize anxiety and to feel more comfortable in a community setting where they're empowered to create themselves. So that's one thing. Social action is a big part of Sangha. I would say if I had to pick 4 categories of focus, it would be nature, history, whole child education, and social action. And we kind of weave them together into our vision. And again, the goal is to empower everyone. So the more teachers and psychologists and other professionals who can get involved with us, I'm hoping to bolster their ability to do more in different ways, because that's the key, is not being afraid to do things differently. And that's really why our kids are the teachers, in a sense. They do things differently. And again, from one another in general as human beings, but also especially kids in the middle who might have ADHD, Asperger's, autism, anxiety, whatever the label might be. They are the role models because they have a different way of doing things. They have a different vision of reality, maybe, than someone who might be referred to as typical. In the end, I don't really view anyone as typical, but we're all ourselves. We're all unique beings, and we, have our strengths and our weaknesses. But you do find that the young people in our program that have been identified as having a particular level of disability have so much to offer and can really be the teachers. So one thing we also train them to be, in a sense, is to embrace their gifts and to become teachers and leaders. I think that's probably the most important part that leads into your question, is we really need to prepare the next generation to value who they are and how they learn, and to move it forward on behalf of others.
I got goosebumps on that one, Christine. Yeah, I felt that, because it's so empowering, everything you're doing, and especially for our children who are labeled, with disabilities. It's really looking at their infinite abilities and gifts, and so you give them such a place to flourish and to see themselves, I think, in such a different light. It's so amazing, all of the work that you're doing. I feel personally so honored and inspired to know you and to have had my children have an opportunity to, you know, to benefit from all that you're doing. It's incredible. It's incredible. So I know not everybody is in Long Island and able to get to the Malcolm House, but the wisdom that you share, and you are expanding out even just virtually, and hearing some of what you're doing, I think will be very inspiring to our audience, or anyone, you know, that hears about it all. Anything's possible, right? But seeing is believing. And so you're, I believe, a way shower. So thank you for everything you're doing.
You're quite welcome. The interesting thing is, none of this is new. When you think about it, of course, what we're creating in our society is new. We haven't seen it within our, you know, lifetime, generally speaking. But when you go back to indigenous sacred ways, you know, I teach world religions at SUNY Old Westbury. So is, you know, education, teaching, and knowledge. And so when you go back to the beginning, you basically know that people had that bond with one another because they were living close to nature, and they valued the individual abilities, skills, and uniqueness of each person, and understood that everyone is going to have lagging skills. So they put people in a position to do what they do best, to contribute in their own way. So I think we need to do that, you know, now with not only our kids, but even when you think about elderly people, you know, who are isolated and not necessarily involved in society in ways that are, you know, productive. So that's another, you know, thing that we will definitely be approaching at some point, is how to incorporate older people as well.
That's really beautiful. And I love that you want to include everybody. You know, everybody's part of a new paradigm, which is ancient. Exactly. Like when I started to feel the energy of the book and start to write it, it was just this download of information. It's just ancient wisdom, and all that's being brought through that is that each person is able to share that wisdom wholeheartedly and collectively, you know, with all of us sharing our gifts through community, through connection, through collaboration, and for the world to take time to do that rather than to be on the old treadmill of just let's follow this way or let's follow that way or whatever. And it's happening. Like, this is already happening. It's nothing to do with like just Jen and I and our book that we've written. You know, it's about, you know, this global massive thing that is happening before our eyes. And I'm actually really thankful for the pandemic for that, for people kind of almost waking up in a way. Like, we saw a lot of destruction and, you know, some things that maybe people weren't happy with, but that made them kind of go into this place of, well, what would make me happy and what's going to help my child and what can I do? And people are taking new career paths. Children are changing, you know, schooling options. They're, you know, they're partnering with people like yourselves, and people are downloading their own ways of schooling. And I really love this revolution. And it does come back to what you were saying, you know, back when you were saying in the 60s as well. Like one of our authors, Janet Veer Fine, was part of that movement and that generation. And so her story is all about, you know, how she was, you know, following A.S. Neil and set up all these Montessori schools and things like that. But at that time, it was kind of a bit woo-woo. It's like, what's she doing? Creating this in her backyard, you know, bringing children to her house and living on the land with the Navajo tribe and, you know, all of this stuff. But it's all become normalized and necessary. And, you know, there's not one size fits all. So it's like whether they want to do this one type of learning or this other type of learning, and being the bridge between both, they're all relevant and they're all necessary. So I just love your program, how it's connecting all these different aspects and bring it really into what I would, really define as holistic on every level, like even caring for the educators and the elderly and, you know, the children all at once. So it's amazing. It's really amazing. So thank you so much for joining us. It was really, really powerful to hear from you. And I feel like you could speak for 3 hours on this. I just feel your heart is so excited to share, and you've got so much to share. Like, there's just so much information that we can sign off with, you know. Is there any other final words before we were going to part ways from either of you?
If our audience wants to find out more about where to find you, Christine, and all of your work, where can they go?
Our website is sangacenter.org. We also have social media pages, Facebook and Instagram, and a YouTube channel that our young people actually developed. and there'll be more there from them in the near future.
Oh, that's so exciting. Beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
For...
And that's Sangha. I know it's a difficult word for people to maybe learn the first time around, but it means community. Sangha means community. And that is what we're all about. And we welcome everyone to participate with us.
Thanks for
appreciate
sharing
being
that.
here.
I was actually going to ask you what was the meaning of Sangha, and I'm so glad that you've closed by sharing that, and it feels so appropriate to be in this community space, even with just us three different educators and parents joining together with everybody else. So thank you so much for being here on our podcast today for a new paradigm of education. And if anybody else out there is listening and they want to join hands with other educators or parents or mentors, or you just have a heart that you want to be supporting our next generations, you're welcome to join our Facebook group as well. So we're called A New Paradigm of Education on Facebook. So thank you both. Namaste.
Namaste.